Welcome to Real Coaching Radio, the podcast for coaches by coaches. We are here to teach you how to get the most out of your clients and yourself. This is where beauty meets the beast, brains meet brawn, and science meets, well, bro science. Welcome to Real Coaching Radio. Welcome to this episode of the podcast. My name is Charlie and I am going to be your host for today. My co-host Mark is probably the brains out of the two of us, but I am the beauty, I am the brawn, I am the bro science. I have a bigger chest and I have bigger arms. He may argue otherwise, but he would be lying. So on today's episode of the podcast, what do we talk about? We discuss what you guys can do in lockdown to keep this training going, to keep your motivation levels up, and what you can focus on. What you can focus on is literally all you can do right now. Let's not worry about what we can do. So in this episode, we discuss running, benefits, how to get started, what you need to be doing. We discuss nutrition and we discuss how to train if you have minimal kit. So if you do enjoy this episode, please find us on Instagram. Please let us know. Please give us 5 stars on iTunes. Without any further ado, let's begin the episode. There was a bit in the first lockdown where people were going for runs, but they were editing their times and stuff. Because obviously on Strava, you can go back in and put it in. So people were doing like a 5K run. It was coming out like 13 minutes.
Yeah, and I think like on Strava, you can, because I found this out, well, I didn't use it, but my brothers used it. And you can something like, if you go for a run and then pause it, and then I was like, restart it again. So obviously like run as fast as you can, get knackered, pause it, get your breath back, recover, and then just like nail it again. All it clocks up is kind of like your total time. But if you keep scrolling down, it tells you like your actual total time as opposed to like just, so the top one's just moving time. So like, yeah, everyone's like running a marathon in like an hour.
Yeah. And I just think, yeah, so ultimately, lockdown gives us an opportunity to kind of work on other things that we maybe have neglected from when we do train in the gym. Because in the gym, we have loads of different equipment, we have barbells, and if you're more inclined for strength training, maybe bodybuilding style of training, or you're just like coming in and going on the rower or going on the ski, then you don't actually have to work on some other things. So as soon as it comes to lockdown and we have no equipment, the question is, well, what do we do? How do I continue to work on my health and fitness? How do I continue to enjoy it? Because I think a lot of times it can be, well, I only enjoy certain things.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is where I want to start, in just the sense of, before we talk about anything, your mindset needs to change around your training, and it needs to open up to the ability to be able to adapt, to be agile, to be flexible with the modalities that you decide to choose. Because I love bodybuilding style of training, but if I couldn't, like the first lockdown, for example, I had no equipment. Running was the only thing I could do. So I think running being one of the main things that people can do during lockdown, how would people go about it? How do people kind of make sure that they don't go on their first run and never want to go on a run again? Because I see that a lot.
Yeah. So I reckon there's a few key things we can talk about here when it comes to running. But yeah, you're right. Like with the whole lockdown kind of thing, we have got to become adaptable. And if you are somebody who's really into strength training and resistance training, kind of we're nearly 12 months into this now. And if the reality is, if you haven't figured out that there probably needs to be a change in some of your training to be able to maintain your health, you're probably a little bit behind the curve. Like we're nearly a year into this now. Like, come on.
Yeah. The first lockdown, I think everyone just thought, well, it will happen. I mean, when they first announced it was 3 weeks, but everyone thought I can cope and I can do that for then. I feel like the second lockdown, when that hit just before Christmas, I really think that threw people out. Because we had that time of normality where people were back in the gym, training properly. We almost had like a summer. It kind of almost felt back to normal.
Yeah, there was that brief little window, wasn't there? And then all of a sudden,
bang. And that's what happened with a lot of my clients. I think I was probably 2 or 3 weeks away from having 5 or 6 clients which we're never going to stop training.
Yeah.
And then that second lockdown hit and motivation levels go, and I can't do what I want to do. There's no point. There's no benefit. But there is loads of benefits from running.
Yeah.
There's loads of benefits from working on other things.
Absolutely. So, and you're right. There are huge amounts of benefits from running. And like at the end of the day, yes, you can get some form of adaptations from this through resistance training. But at the end of the day, the harsh reality is if your heart stops working, that's it, isn't it? You know? So looking after your health before anything else has to be a number one priority. And I think if this pandemic and if coronavirus hasn't taught us anything, like has taught us anything, like it's got to be that. It's because there is, we know that there is a higher risk of, bad things happening from coronavirus if you are of poor cardiovascular health and if you are severely overweight.
That's the when you see anything come through on the news, if you see a lot of the young people that are maybe like tragically dying, or the people that are getting really bad effects of coronavirus, a lot of times there is underlying health conditions and things we can do to kind of almost mitigate the risks in a way. But obviously we're all at risk, and sometimes you don't know if you do have an underlying health condition, and that's obviously that's horrible. But what we can do is everything we can do to make sure that we have the best opportunity to fight this off. And staying fit and staying healthy is one of the best things you can do.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, so let's kick into some of the benefits of running. I think not even getting into any of the physiological benefits, like I think one of the first biggest benefits really is it's an opportunity for people to get outside at the moment, which is going to be massive for people's mental health, mental well-being. If people are stuck in their house all day and kind of, they used to be in the scenario where they would obviously wake up at home, but then they'd change their space, they'd go to work, and and they no longer had this third space anymore. And that, that may have been the gym, or it may have been whatever else it is that people are into. And that kind of like third space has now been taken away from them. And almost to a certain extent, that second space has been taken away from them because they're now doing everything from home. Yeah. So I think just having an opportunity to get outside, get some fresh air. I know for a fact, like, it has a big impact on me. If I spend a lot of time at the computer, I spend a lot of time doing some work, not even going out to doing any form of, like, I just take a walk to the shop. It's 10 minutes. Yeah. And even that has an impact on me. So forgetting any of the physiological benefits, I think one of the first things we need to make sure people are aware of is just the mental aspect that it's going to help people with.
I'm massively a home bird, so I love being at home, and I love kind of, if I'm away for more than 2 weeks, I want to come home, right? Yeah. But if I'm in the same place constantly, all I want to do is get out, and that's the thing. If you're doing everything in the same place, you're cooking, you're sleeping, you're working, all in the same place, getting outdoors and getting the fresh air is obviously one of the things, but not feeling trapped, because I feel a lot of times our mental health can feel a bit. It can get compromised when we do feel trapped, because you feel like you're pressured into a certain situation, or like kind of anxieties building, and that trapped feeling really does start to kind of, I guess, unhinge people a little bit. And that's the one thing this lockdown is doing, is just trapping everyone. So running, getting outside gives you an opportunity to get away from that.
And it's easy to fall into that space, isn't it? Because, let's say you do a full day just sat at a computer, not moving, and that rolls into 2 days, and that rolls into 3 days. Like the longer you leave it to do any of this sort of stuff and to break that and to get outside, the harder it's going to be. Like we're creatures of habits by nature, right? So the longer we spend inside, the more time, like, people just kind of, they just start to adapt to that. Just like, that's just another day here, isn't it?
But the thing is, I think, if you look back through history, humans have always wanted to find easier ways to do things. If you look at everything we do, like, the fact that Elon Musk has got these electric cars that self-drive now is because if there's a puddle, well, I don't want to walk across the puddle. That car's going to come to me. So we are used to creating situations, which means that we don't have to do that much. We don't have to work that hard if we don't want to.
Yeah.
And that's why, that's one of the biggest barriers for people running is it's hard.
Yeah.
And understand that little bit of adversity, that little bit of challenge really does start to give some kind of purpose. And I say purpose because when you're doing constant days on your laptop, when you're doing constant work, when you're stuck in the same four walls, life feels draining and it just feels grey. Everything feels grey. And it's almost like I'm getting up and I'm reliving the same day over and over again. Whereas if you do get out and you run and you start to feel a little bit of a challenge, you can start to overcome challenges. And that's one of the reasons I think running's so amazing, is because the mental aspect of getting outside is brilliant. But then the actual mental aspect of how hard it is and having to battle with your own brain. No, I can keep going. No, I will run that extra kilometer. That's the hard bit. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think to help people get going, there's a few things that people could do with understanding. And there's this fine line between it being hard for you. Obviously if people are doing this to try and get fitter, then there needs to be some form of challenge. It's going to have to stress the body to a certain extent. So it needs to be tough to a certain extent. But I do think there's that fine line where people just kind of, they put their trainers on, they're really enthusiastic, and that's great. And they just go out and they just kind of like nail it for the first mile.
If you follow David Goggins, then that's the mindset you're going to be into.
Yeah.
Did David Goggins start by doing that? Probably not. If you read his book, like, he went for his first run and couldn't even run.
Yeah.
So my point is, start from the start. Walk before you can run.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when it comes to training at certain heart rate zones and when it comes to training at certain intensities, I think not enough people train at a really, really low intensity, a kind of like this zone 2 this zone 2 heart rate zone. If you imagine there's 5 zones, and then we're wanting you to train and do a lot of your time in kind of like this zone 2 area, and for you to be able to perform exercise that kind of area, to make this really understandable for people, like, realistically, you're still able to have a conversation, you're able to put sentences together, you could do this with a friend and you could converse at the same time whilst doing it. And it's that kind of intensity that people need to start at. And it's the same with resistance training. And we spoke about this a little bit on a previous podcast, in terms of what you see on social media is you see people posting PBs. You see people deadlifting whatever, squatting whatever. Like, what you don't see from those people is the amount of work they've done with an empty barbell, the amount of work they still do with an empty barbell. When it comes to people who are good at running, a lot of times you see PBs and you see like them breaking records and whatever it might be. But what you don't see is the vast amount of mileage that they put in at a real low intensity.
It was Nick Bear, isn't it? Just done sub-3 marathon.
Yeah.
But the work he puts in, it's almost monotonous in the way that he does it. Because it is just constantly trying to improve, but having a real kind of structured approach to that. And he didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to run a sub-3 marathon and it's going to be really easy. You have to put work in to get to that place.
Yeah, and we have this, there's a good rule that people can follow, and it's an 80-20 rule. And some people may have heard of this when it comes to, or used an 80-20 rule when it comes to nutrition, in terms of, 80% of my diet is going to be good quality food, and then 20% can be kind of, whatever I really want it to be. And to a certain extent, that might get you some success. When it comes to training, specifically when it comes to cardiovascular training and improving your ability to run, if you like, we kind of almost need to flip that on its head. And like, 80% of the work that you do needs to pretty much be done in and around this zone 2 area. So 80% of the work that you do needs to be easy, sustainable, manageable work. And then the 20% of the work that you do might be some more faster paced runs. It might be some interval training, but people don't do enough of the easy stuff because they're just like, it's easy. So it's not doing anything.
If it doesn't get me out of breath, then I'm not doing anything. I'm not working hard enough.
Absolutely.
It follows along from that beast mode mentality, that David Goggins mentality, which does have its place and it really does kind of kick you up the ass sometimes, and it does need to happen. But if you still follow the rules, then you'll just get further than just doing it on hard work alone.
Absolutely. So, and the thing is, if you do just go out and just try and go at the fastest possible pace that you can, and especially if you're new to this, you're not going to last very long. And what I mean by that is you're not going to last very long in terms of how far you're going to be able to run, but you're also not going to last very long in terms of how long you do this for, because you're just going to get sick of the fact that you can only run a certain short distance. And that's not to say you can only run a certain short distance because you're mega unfit. That's just how like our energy systems work.
Yeah. If you're going to be trying to kind of go balls to the wall every single time you run, and you're going to be wondered why you're hanging, it's because of that. And I think that's the confusing bit, because running when you first start is really hard. If you haven't ran and you go out for a jog, it can be really hard. And it's almost, I feel for a lot of people it can be, well, if I don't do at least a 5K, I'm there's no point in doing it. And that's where you go wrong, is deciding that I'm going to go for a run and try and hit a PB on your first run in 6 months. It needs to slowly ramp up and have this process of, well, for my first 2 to 3 weeks, I'm going to be in this 80%. I'm going to be, most of my training is going to be at this low level percentage of my heart rate.
Yeah, and it's kind of, people put that sort of stuff on everything, like, I must run a 5K, I have to do 10,000 steps, I must be in a calorie deficit of 500 calories, I must do 10 reps, like I must put 5 kilos on a barbell. Like, they're all arbitrary numbers, like they're numbers, and you're dealing with human physiology and a living and adaptive organism that changes like almost all of the time.
But things only go up in 5s and 10s.
Do you know what I mean? So yeah. So, but they are, aren't they? They're just arbitrary numbers that don't mean anything.
But because of social media, they do mean stuff to people. Like when the first lockdown hit, everyone was doing a 5K challenge and things like that. And it does get you out running. It does make you feel good. But if you haven't ran before, like that's why things like Couch to 5K are a thing, because it's a way of getting you from like part A to part B. How do I get from not being able to run to doing nothing on a daily basis to being able to run a 5K? And it is this low level, slow work that you need to kind of put in to start with.
Yeah. So if for you right now that is a walk, then that is absolutely fine. Like, go out for a walk, even if you have to, like, go and get a coffee, go out for a walk with a friend and walk at a pace where you can still converse, you can still have a conversation, but you can hear clearly that your heart rate is slightly elevated.
Bit of panting, bit of power walking.
Yep. And then progress from there, build that into a run from there.
And yeah, so running can give you so many benefits. Like, that's kind of part of the thing that we're trying to explain here, is that when it comes to training in lockdown, that you have to be able to change your goals and change your mindset to things. And it is just working on different things, and working on your fitness, working on your cardiovascular is really important at this time, and it's just something you can do. Switch your mindset. Now, it's not perfect. In an ideal world, we'd all be in the gym training still, but we can't.
Yep.
And you can sit there and concentrate on what you can't do, and you can look on social media and see people in Australia training and wish you were there. But what you can do is still do something for your health and fitness. And I think that's the people you see stay kind of, I call it a career, in their training career for a long time, is because they do change, they adapt, and their training career changes over time. They try different things, and they do adapt to when they need to, because they understand that the training benefits aren't just for the physical and how you look. It's your mental, it's how you feel, it's everything.
Yeah. And like, I know this has been going on a long time, and I know we're still not out of it, and there's still a little way to go yet until we are back to normality. But in the grand scheme of things, like across your whole lifespan, it's still really not that long.
Yeah. Jesus, it's not though, is it? If even if you only live like 10 years,
that's probably going to ruffle a few feathers with people. But like the reality is, like, it's not that long.
It's not that long, and I think the thing is, because all you hear is the word COVID, all you hear is the words lockdown, and there is no end in sight. It does feel like, what do I do?
Yeah,
and you do what you can. And you find some enjoyment out of that. There's that thing that I said before. It's not necessarily you have to do what you love. You have to love what you do. And you find a way to enjoy what you're doing. And whether that's setting mini goals for this week, like last week I ran 3K. Well, this week I'm going to run 3.5K. And it can be that small, because same as when it comes to weight training, progressive overload is just putting a little bit more stress on your body. And the same thing goes when you want to run, when you want to do anything like that.
Yeah. So just, add bits. This is an opportunity for you to grow outside of the things that you normally do. So, if you've never ran before, like, who knows, you could be really good at running, but you've never tried.
And it could be something you really enjoy, yet you've never managed to get past lacing your shoes up. It is hard. And running is one of these things which the mental aspect is so difficult. And you see people running and you think, oh, like, well, I'd hate to be that person. Whenever I see people running, no one ever looks like they are enjoying it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that is the fear that people get. But
unless you're like Phoebe from Friends,
right? But if everyone ran like that, I think we'd be in a lot of a happier world, to be fair. So when you do go for runs and stuff like that, it's the bit afterwards. And that's the bit that you want to get to, because that feeling afterwards, because they call it, is it a runner's high that they talk about? Or is that when people find the zone? Is it like, or are they two separate things?
Yeah, I think they're probably two separate things. But I know for a fact, like, I love resistance training. I do love resistance training. I love a barbell. I love dumbbells. But I by far get a bigger buzz from some form of cardiovascular training, whether that be going for a run or doing something that's a bit more circuit cardiovascular based in the gym. I finish like with a much bigger buzz and a much bigger high. And I know that kind of physiologically, this doesn't necessarily really mean anything at all in terms of the amount of results that people get. But there's a feeling of satisfaction when I finish a workout like dripping in sweat.
Yeah.
And I know that there is, that's not to say that just because a workout didn't leave you dripping in sweat, it's less effective than another. I'm not saying that, but there's something specifically for me, I feel like I've accomplished and I've achieved something that's what just makes me feel good.
It's that achievement is the biggest thing, because you can sit there and, to be honest with you, you can sit and bitch and moan, and we all do it. I do it so much. I catch myself. I constantly going on about this thing of being really self-aware. So I'm trying to catch myself when I find myself bitching and moaning about this situation, because it is a rubbish situation to be in. It's not something we all want to be in. But if we continue to just moan about it, then we don't actually do anything about it.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I hate, is there something I can do in this situation? And it's that whole look for solutions kind of, and you'll find results. If you look for problems, you'll find excuses.
Yep.
So that's where you need to try and switch it, is like, in every situation, what can you do? And to start with, you just say you don't give up. Whatever happens, whatever hurdle you have to overcome, you can overcome that. You just find whichever direction you need to go in. You find a way to get over it. And that's what you do with this situation. Well, running is probably option Z on my list for things I want to do.
Yeah. But
it's something which I know is going to help me, so I do it.
Yeah. And I think you will surprise yourself with running. Like, if we've had a couple of, since the gym's closed, we've had like a bit of a run club going on with the members here, and there's been a good handful of members who have said, I don't like running. Running's not for me. I've never enjoyed running. It's just not really something I want to do. And last weekend they were running up a muddy hill in freezing cold weather, and all absolutely loved it.
Absolutely loved it. And I think, so Neil's done an amazing job there by creating almost this running club. When you look on Strava, I think when you add it all together, we're heading up towards Scotland now.
Yeah, we've gone from Bristol to London and from London heading towards Scotland.
Which is, when you see that on a map, it's amazing. And to think that there's people who didn't ever start training kind of until after the first lockdown, that are now running up and down a hill in the mud, in the cold, in the wet.
You give them some, they're like in adverse conditions, like,
and they love it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is just the fact of the thought is probably worse than actually doing it.
Absolutely.
A lot of the times, that's what happens with us anyway, right? I mean, when we think of a situation, if you've got a meeting, if you've got to go and stand and talk in front of a class and you've got to present something, it's never actually doing it's the problem. It's that build up, and you get the butterflies, and you get worried and you get anxious, which are all understandable. But as soon as you get into it and you start to learn that it's just these little things that you need to do, and you feel amazing once you've done them. David Goggins calls it the cookie jar. And this is something which I actually really like, and something which I think about, and you can implement this into all different parts of your life. So when you do something and you achieve something, you can make this physical, or you just keep this cookie jar in your brain, but you basically go, right, I've achieved something. If it's going for a 5K run, I've done a 5K run. You put that in your head. So then next time you come to do a 5K run and you're feeling tired and you're feeling like you can't do it, you pull from that. And you pull from all of these achievements to make you go, well, I'm only 2K in. I've done a 5K before. I know I can do this.
Yep.
And you start to pull from these things, and you start to think, well, when I did that hard thing that I didn't think I could do, when I did completed death by burpees, when I'd done that, I felt amazing. And I didn't think I could do it. Same when it comes to, I'm going for a run. I don't think I could do it. But you pull from that cookie jar, and you start to pull out all of these things, and eventually build it up to a point where you're almost unstoppable, because you have so many examples of how you overcame something you didn't think you could. And this COVID situation is going to be one of these memories in that cookie jar, that you got through it and you did these things to do that. And a lot of times it just comes from having that solution-based mindset. What is the solution here?
Yeah. And so staying on that point, I know we spoke a little bit about one on actually our very first podcast, about a book that I read by James Clear. And James Clear talks about a very similar thing in terms of having this jar. But he talks about having like a bit more of a physical jar. And whenever you achieve something, whatever it might be, on a small bit of paper, just write it down and put it in. Make sure the jar is clear so that you can constantly see like this build up of paper that's coming out. And if you're having a bit of a bad day, you could just go back. You could read some of those things, like, this is what I've achieved. But also not just that, like, we're in this situation which is far from ideal. But you can then see this physical thing that's in front of you building based on all of your successes that you're achieving in what could be classed as a negative environment.
Yeah. And to pull a positive out of a negative is a skill which is really hard to learn, but it's something which we can all do. And this is why I find mindset to be a funny thing, because there's no blueprint for the right mindset. There's no blueprint on how to do it. You can read books and you can get ideas. And I think when you do read these books and you like these cookie jar ideas, don't just think, oh, that's a cool idea, and never do it. Actually start to implement these things, because mindset is hard to change on your own, because again, we're creatures of habits. We just do the same thing over and over again because it feels good and it's probably not hard. And it is hard to pull from these habits, to write down your successes, especially like if you're a bit of a self-negative person and you don't really see your own positives. It can be quite hard to sit down and go, what have I actually achieved? But when I talk about self-awareness, I'm talking about realistic self-awareness, talking about actual positive self-awareness as well, because I feel, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but there are some people that are so kind of negative that you forget to think the positives that happen. And what I mean is, when I'm being self-aware, I catch myself when I am bitching and moaning about COVID, when I'm talking about things which I can kind of probably do something about and I'm moaning about it. I catch myself and challenge myself. But self-awareness doesn't mean you challenge yourself when you get victories. You have to be really aware and understand, actually, that was something I really did well. That is something which is really good. That is something really positive. And you add that to the cookie jar, because you have to be aware when you're being negative about yourself as well and not giving yourself the credit.
Yeah.
Because you have to give yourself credit for things. And that's one of these things with mindset, is that negativity is so easy. And if we're in this constant state of being negative, we're in a negative environment. What is there to be positive about? Well, it comes from you, and it comes from you being honest and going, I can pull positive things from this situation. And that's something you can do by implementing the things this cookie jar idea.
Yeah, and that's a powerful place to be if you can start doing that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's easy. I'm not saying everyone is going to do it tomorrow and wake up a different person. It's taken me 2 years to actually work out I needed to start being self-aware, let alone actually doing it. Mm-hmm. So it's just something that you need to be aware of, because being negative about your situation and just thinking about what you can't do is really going to just start to make lockdown and training a lot difficult.
Absolutely.
Which probably brings us on to other things you can do. So if you are someone who's into resistance training, I don't want to lose my gains, bro. So what can I do? Yeah.
Well, I think, we did a podcast last week, didn't we, on building muscle?
Yeah. Days going to just go into one now.
Yeah. So we did a podcast last week on building muscle, and some of the things we spoke about are some of the things that people can do during lockdown with little to either no kit or a very small amount of kit. So I think if you're somebody who wants to try and maintain some muscle tissue, the reality is get yourself into a headspace where, unless you've got access to probably a bit more external load, it's unlikely that you're going to build vast amounts of muscle tissue. However, you could still maintain a good amount of that muscle tissue. And some of the things that we can do is we can certainly just do some tempo training, so we can really start to slow the exercises down. So if you're doing some bodyweight squats or some press ups as an example, rather than just kind of like smashing out reps, just make sure those reps are really controlled. Try and make a rep last like 6 seconds. So we slow down the eccentric phase, so we slow the lowering phase down. We might have a pause when we're kind of a centimeter or so off the floor, and then we drive back up. And a lot of the time we talk about slowing down the eccentric phase, which is the correct thing to do. But you know what? If you're really strong and you can do a lot of press ups, slow down the concentric phase as well. So really slow on the way down, really slow on the way up. And you'll be surprised, if you went if you're good at press ups and you went 6 seconds down, 6 seconds up and tried to do 10 reps, you're going to know about it.
I get one of my clients at the moment is doing pretty much exactly that, and we're doing 10-second reps, and he only has to do 4, because it is
40 seconds of work.
40 seconds of work, and that's the thing, and that's the one thing that tempo training can give you is just more, I guess, time under tension, more time of controlling a movement as well.
Yeah,
and I think one of the best ways to use tempo training is to pair it with unilateral work. Bulgarian split squats.
Yep, absolutely. Challenge yourself. If you're probably used to somebody that's doing back squats, leg presses, you're doing everything on both legs. Get uncomfortable a little bit. Do things on one leg. And that's the one thing with tempo training is really slowing down a movement is difficult, but it's something which you start to actually get control. And I think coming back to going into back squatting and leg pressing, you'll thank yourself for doing those things. Yeah, you'll probably feel more stable. You'll probably have better proprioception, so better awareness of how your body's moving. So you'll probably have more control over the movement and understand the movement pattern a little bit better if you're performing them with good quality technique at the moment. And all of those things realistically are huge prerequisites anyway before you even loaded a barbell. So it's not, if anything, it's just going to help improve the way that you move, your positioning and your control over movement, so that when you come back into the gym, your strength is just going to skyrocket.
But that's the thing as well, is what look back at your training and think, what could I probably improve on? And if it is maybe getting deeper in a squat, then let's work on controlling a movement all the way through into a squat. And this is where I say you need to have this flexible mindset when it comes to what is my focus? My focus was going in and doing 5 sets of 5 and getting as much weight off the floor as possible. But now it's actually about controlling the movement. Where do my knees go? What's going on with my body here? And you start to change your thought into, well, what's the movement? How do I make this perfect?
Yep. Yeah. So a lot of people when they come into the gym, they're focusing on strength. But there's some prerequisites to strength, which would be mobility and stability. Like without those two, your strength is going to be limited by both of those two or one or the other. So if you are somebody who's in the gym and like your main goal is just to train for strength, you can still maintain some strength without having any a lot of external load. But one thing you can definitely do is work on mobility, and you can work on stability, so that when you can get back to lots of external load, your strength is just going to go through the roof.
And mobility is something which you can do without any equipment. Doing these tempo work you could do without any equipment. And that's one of the benefits of it, is if you are going to take our advice and start to improve your cardiovascular, then you can start running on 3 days and maybe doing some mobility and kind of, I'm going to quote unquote strength training tempo work to help you learn how to get in positions correctly. So then when you do come back to the gym, well, you're going to recover quicker between sets because you've done all of this running. So you're going to be able to recover a lot easier, and you've learned how to get into positions correctly, under control, with stability, which is the main things when it comes to lifting weights.
Yeah.
If you're a newbie, that's where we'd start people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
No weights necessarily. Yeah, slow reps, controlled reps.
Yeah. And if you're somebody who has been hammering your body in the gym for the last however long, do you know what? It might be a welcome break. Like, kind of like reset your body a little bit, like increase your mobility, like give your joints, take some pressure off your joints a little bit, mobilize more, have more stability, and just be refreshed and ready for when the gym does open back up again.
And we say this because we really do understand how hard this can be, and it is very difficult on people's mental health, especially the one thing people get when they come back in is, oh, I've lost so much strength. But what have you done to try and keep that? That's the thing. What have you done to try and keep your fitness? Because it's very easy to say that, I mean, this situation, it is out of our hands. Of course it is. But what is in our control, and what can I do to improve my position for when I do return to the gym? And if you do nothing, I hate people who moan and don't do anything.
Yeah.
I really, if you did tempo training, went running, and were still training 5 days a week, you came back in and then moaned to me about how much strength you'd lost or that you've missed it so much, I'd sit there and listen to you all day. But if you don't do anything,
yeah,
you only have yourself to blame. And I'm saying it's I guess a bit of a hard truth, but it is just how it is.
Yeah. And I think another thing, which I know we wasn't necessarily planning to talk about, but I think another thing that people can do, and it's probably something for another podcast, there is no better opportunity for you to probably sort your nutrition out than there is right now. Now, I read something on social media probably 3 or 4 days ago now, and it was a post that said something about, this isn't the perfect opportunity to be able to, physically change or whatever. I can agree with some of that, because depending on what you're trying to change, you might not have access to the equipment that's required. And then it also said this is not the opportunity for you, not the perfect opportunity for you to be able to, take a hold of your nutrition. But I massively disagree with that. Like, one of the biggest barriers I get from a lot of clients when it comes to nutrition, when we start working together, is the fact that I don't have time to prepare food. Well, you're at home all day long right now.
How much time do you need?
Do you know what I mean? Like, you are at home all day.
But right, I think that's the thing mainly, is because when people think about food, they think about how it tastes, and now you have literally so much time where you can start to change your eating habits and start to experiment with healthy meals. Like, Joe Wicks has got so many books out, right? The Lean in 15 books, and some of the meals in there are so nice. I've recently started doing nutrition, and I writ nutrition for a guy last week, and he said to me, he texted me yesterday and was like, that evening meal was amazing. And it's a real healthy food. It's got kale in it. Do you know what I mean? It's got all your proteins in it. It's got everything you need. So you don't have to look at nutrition as being healthy and not tasting good. You can cook things in a way to make it taste good. So that's probably the last thing we're going to leave you on, is when you think about this lockdown, when you think about all the different things you can do, there are a lot of options. I know we cannot necessarily weight train. We cannot gain tons and tons of muscle. We cannot do the things that we want to do. But what can we do in this situation? You can start to work on your cardiovascular fitness. You can start to run. You can start to get outside and enjoy this time outside. You can work on tempo training. So we may not be able to gain tons of muscle, but we can maintain. If you've got bands, if you've got small dumbbells, you can put tempo training, unilateral work into your routine and start to feel some benefits of controlling these movements. Mobility work and stretching stuff, things that are going to make you feel refreshed for when you do return to the gym. Giving our joints this break is probably one of the things we need. We very rarely want to have a recovery week anyway. I mean, it's a long week, but it's a recovery nonetheless, a recovery year. But start to think of the things you can do and stop being so negative on yourself. Stop being so hard on yourself. I mean, that's the other thing, is people do get hard on themselves at this time. I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. Well, no, you're not, but the situation isn't the greatest. So just understand and be kind to yourself that you are doing what you can at this time.
Yeah, give yourself a bit of a break, right?
Give yourself a break and just do what you can during this time. But working on your nutrition is, again, one of the things that I think really can be focused on during this time.
I think nutrition, just a final point, I think nutrition is plays a huge role in you can't out train a bad diet.
No.
So regardless of how hard you're training, if your nutrition is not where it needs to be, you're not going to see the results that you want to get. So if this is an opportunity now for you to take control of your nutrition, like if you're eating well and you're somebody who wants to be able to preserve muscle tissue, nutrition is going to massively help you with that. If you're somebody who wants to lose a bit of weight, nutrition is massively going to help you with that. If you're somebody who wants to get fitter and improve performance, nutrition can have a huge impact on that.
Imagine if you came back to the gym when gyms reopened and your nutrition was on point.
Yep.
Your nutrition was there. Your nutrition was done.
Yep.
Like you're literally in the best situation. If your nutrition has never been the best, it could be because of time. You have all the time in the world. Let's get yourself in a routine ready for when gyms open again. I've got this brilliant diet and I'm going to feel the best I can. I think if you do want any kind of further advice with your nutrition, maybe you're looking for a program to help you with your running, then if you head to originseries.com, you'll actually find some programs there and some courses which you can actually start to learn about your nutrition, and you can start to increase your running, help your cardiovascular health. There's a few running programs that people can join in on there. So what I would say is that this time, the best thing you can do is what you can do. So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you so much. This has been Real Coaching Radio. If you want to find myself or Mark, you can go to @HackTheBodyHackTheMind or @MarkOriginSeries on Instagram. Thank you very much for tuning in. We will see you on the next one. In this lockdown, you have a couple of different decisions to make, and one of them is what are you going to do to stay fit? Now, my advice is do what you can and do what you enjoy. It is always what you enjoy. If it's running out in the cold, then go and do that. If it's doing some tempo training in your living room or stretching or finding something else you can do, it can be skateboarding. Just try and stay fit, try and stay healthy. Obesity is such a risk at this time, and if there is any reason that you needed to combat and change your lifestyle, you have a perfectly good one now. So if you do want to connect to us, there are loads of different ways you can do it. You can join us on Instagram. You can go to @MarkOriginSeries, or you can go to @HackTheBodyHackTheMind, and that's where you will find us. You can also go to Origin Series on Instagram as well, and they basically have a load of educational content. It's really good if you are a trainer. It's even better if you are just a regular gym goer. So thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Real Coaching Radio.